up on Mr. Wilshusen. You had indicated the increased budgets. Actually, I just wanted to make an observation. Actually, in the report that the speaker had actually cited and asked the question about that I had asked was from Hill newspaper article saying the IRS cybersecurity staff was cut as the budget rose. And that was also, they referenced an IG report that you had done, Mr. George, and it was also a cybersecurity online report that referenced that also. So I'd like to just put that into the record in recognition of what you all had said. Then I also wanted to pick up on what you testified about, Mr. Wilshusen, about the agency using easily guessed passwords, software patches not being done, and you had said the IRS had inconsistent execution. Would this, put it in a little simpler way, that people just weren't doing their jobs? The people who were there, regardless of what budgets and what things are being done, I mean, those are basic cyber hygiene things that we've all heard about. I mean, we very familiar from the OPM breach and the hearings we've had here. So when I hear these kind of things that are very common and the inconsistent execution really being people not doing their jobs, would that be a correct assessment?
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. These are very common types of security practices that need to be implemented, and they were not being consistently implemented across the IRS. We think there are probably several reasons why that occurs. In some respects, for example, we looked at the IRS's security testing and evaluation procedures, and we noted that they weren't always that successful in identifying the same type of vulnerabilities that we identified. And we also noted that when IRS implemented, for example, said that it had implemented 28 of the recommendations that we previously made, that it had not actually implemented 9 of those. And so that's a reflection over its information security practices or its practices for closing out recommendations before they were actually implemented. So there's probably a number of reasons why these conditions continue to exist, and certainly not performing those functions and responsibilities in an appropriate manner contribute to that.
And I'd like to ask you and Mr. George, given that right now there's basically no one in charge of cyber at the IRS from what we've learned today.
I think that's unfair. That's not what
Well,
I said.
I'm asking Mr. Wilshusen and Mr. George, is that, in terms, you were asked earlier about the safety, and when these basic things that you're seeing, and when they're telling you 28 of them have been implemented, but 9 of those haven't, their own self-assessment is inaccurate. You tell them what to do, the inconsistent execution is, execution is doing your job and being able to do these basic tasks. Do you have confidence that you're going to see this anytime soon? Yeah.
Madam Chairwoman, we did make a recommendation which the IRS agreed to. The one kink in their armor was that there was not a service-wide approach to cybersecurity. A particular unit had a dedicated division that would interact lightly with other units within the Internal Revenue Service, but it wasn't across the board. And my understanding is that the IRS, the Commissioner, has agreed to change that.
And we've implemented that.
But I would just note that, we had OPM before us. The Commissioner also noted that in the private sector these things happen, but I would note that Ms. Archuleta is no longer working at OPM, as are other CEOs of companies where they had these major breaches. They were not working there. So while Ms. Archuleta did move on, and I think when we look at these issues, I don't have confidence. I can't go back to those people, more than half of whom in my district raise their hands when we hear about these letters and their breaches. They certainly didn't have confidence in OPM, and I know they don't have confidence with the IRS. And this is a pretty important area where we need to have confidence. And I don't see it there, and I think you've had other people move on when they aren't having consistent execution of their jobs. And I think what we've seen here today is not a lot of consistent execution at all, or confidence that there will be going forward. So I will yield back my time, and if Mr. Lipinski would, thank you.